Hello, welcome to Cruising in the Light and Shadow. This is Inanna Moon, and welcome to my guest, Marissa Kennerson.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank
Good.
you.
There will be a further introduction, but I wanted to start with a couple of quotes. The first two are on writing. To me, the greatest pleasure of writing is not what it's about, but the inner music that words make. And that's from Truman Capote. And the second one is from Virginia Woolf. Every secret of a writer's soul, every experience of his life, every quality of his mind is written large in his works.
Absolutely.
We'll be looking at this, okay? And then I pulled just a little quote on tarot because you'll see why this is coming up. But for the tarot cards, fear is dangerous, not the tarot. The tarot represents the spectrum of the human condition, the good, the evil, the light, and the dark. Do not fear the darker aspects of the human condition. Understand them. The tarot is a storybook about life, about the greatness of human accomplishment, and also the ugliness we are each capable of. This is by Benabel Wen, who wrote the Holistic Tarot, an integrative approach to using tarot for personal growth. And with that, I am happy to introduce Marissa Kennerson, who is an author, who is a published author. You're a writer by trade, day and night? This is what you do?
Yeah, because if I'm not doing fiction, I'm doing a little bit of copywriting and sort of corporate writing. But
all right. And so let me read a little of her bio, and then we'll delve more deeply. She received her BA in English Literature from the University of California, Berkeley. Before earning her master's degree in psychology and art therapy, she worked for Wired and Glamour magazines. She's the author of the YA cult suspense novel The Family, which she did not write from personal experience, since the only cult she's ever been in is the cult of YouTube makeup tutorials. Mm-hmm. She lives in California with her family. Tarot is Marissa's fantasy debut with Razorbill and was published February 2019. I didn't realize it was just in this year.
Yeah,
so
very
this
recent.
is exciting. All right.
Yes.
Wonderful. What made you want to become a writer?
I was thinking about this question. I was born a writer. I wasn't necessarily born a good writer, but I was thinking that so many things in life take effort, and
right.
Writing, it certainly takes effort to meet deadlines and to get better and to accomplish things, but I just write. I cannot not write. I've been like that since a little girl. I was a little girl.
What did you write as a little girl?
I filled journals.
Yes.
Filled them. And then I would write very sort of cheesy, purpley prose stories. And I had I'll date myself here. I had a DOS computer kind of thing, and one of those printers that would be, and I would let him do that, and I would rip them off and run upstairs to my parents, and so just stories. I was so much more prolific than I am now.
It was so much easier.
It wasn't necessarily anything anyone would want to read, but I wrote tons.
I will confess, I wrote a lot. I wrote fantasies, and I wrote poetry. And
lots of poetry.
Yes, journals. If I'd hear an idea I liked, I would write from that or about that.
Yeah.
Did you do that like through your summers and?
I'm trying to think. There's just I was probably really influenced by movies and music, and there was a lot of poetry.
Oh yes. Okay. Well, that's
very
awesome.
heartfelt.
We have that in common.
Teen poetry. Yeah. And then up through college.
Oh, angst.
A lot of angst.
What they call angst.
And like a lot of metaphors. I remember I wrote a piece and read it at my mom's wedding, and I was like, love is a goddess, and I'm sure she had like a trailing coat, and it was in jewels, and I don't know, something I would just cringe at now, but I didn't even hear the term purpley prose until I was like a freshman in college.
I've never heard that term.
You haven't?
What does
It's
it
when,
mean?
like what I just described, when the prose is just
there.
overdone and too
Over the
much.
top.
Yeah, and you're just like, look, I just feel a little nauseated after I read it. So.
Oh my gosh.
It's the opposite of Hemingway. I think that's a great way to
yeah, right.
think of
Exactly. Oh, yeah. A while later in, like maybe high school, I loved Hemingway, but I didn't understand what do you mean less adjectives? How
Right.
could you,
I know, exactly.
How can you do that?
There's adjectives that you're going to love.
Is that possible? Yeah, I still have my book of poems. Oh my gosh. Never mind.
I wish I had brought one and you had brought one.
Moving on. Oh no.
It'd be hilarious.
I just remember a line like, a shell I sit in all alone, when I was 13 years old.
I still love that.
No wonder my mother was like, I'm worried about you at that time. But I got through it. It's okay.
Yes, we're here.
So what there was something else you alluded to in your biography, which I liked. It says you were too serious a child. Was that what was said about you?
Well, it was said by my older brothers. They were constantly like, "Oh, you're so sensitive." And I noticed a difference.
I mean, apart from writing, it sounds like you were.
Yeah, but I was as sort of as. I have two sides, and I see it in my son, actually, like a super hammy, silly side and a super serious side. And I had sort of, I don't know if it was because my parents got divorced early or just who I am, but I think I had a gravity as a child. Okay. Sometimes when other kids, because of that sensitivity, other kids were playing and goofing off, actually, there's a story by John Barth.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's called Lost in the Funhouse, and my brother gave it to me when I was probably like in middle school. And it's about a child who, all his friends are going through a funhouse in Coney Island, and they go through and they're having a blast, and Ambrose, this main character, cannot get through it. He's getting caught at every corner, he's analyzing too much, and it's the most terrifying. And I was like, that's how I felt.
That's how it was for you? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
and life was kind of like that. So it wasn't horrible or anything, it was just that I noticed a seriousness.
Right, exactly.
And
it sounds like you were a people watcher, I'm betting.
Total
as
people
well.
watcher.
Yeah, just observing a lot of things,
Yeah.
which a writer would do.
Yeah, and analyzing everything, and then just everything would just hit me harder, whether it was movies or poetry. Or I watch.
Yeah, it would touch you very deeply.
Yeah, to this day, if I watch a scary movie with my husband, he's like, "It's just," or painful. There's something. It's just a movie. I have to remind myself, these actors have met. This didn't really happen.
This didn't really happen.
I do. I have to
when I leave here, that story will be over.
Yeah.
Yes,
I have to say to myself, the actor knew that was coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. When did writing take a turn for you from just always writing to now I'm going to make it a work, or I would really like to see something published?
I think that so I went into working in magazines and editorial right out of college. I worked at Wired, and then I worked at Glamour. And so I was writing sort of journalistic kinds of things. And I think I had put the idea of writing fiction away. It just seemed too, like, how could that really happen?
How is that going to go anywhere?
Yeah, and then I started doing a lot of artwork to just relax, because writing was almost becoming oppressive in my head. I felt like I had so many ideas, but I didn't know how to execute at that time. So I started just doing art to relax. And then I got to that point with art. You do something enough where it was like, oh my gosh, now I have to figure this out.
It becomes a job.
Yeah, or you really need to hone your skill. It's not just play anymore.
Okay, yeah, you reach a point where you
my hobby
you want to polish
became
it.
Yeah. So I went and got my master's in art therapy and psychology. And I was practicing a little bit, working towards my license. I was practicing, I shouldn't say a little bit. And I loved it. And I ended up getting a book deal. It was really weird. It just sort of came back to me in a strange way. I had written a short story. My son would not nap in the crib. I would drive around and park for 2 hours. I had a yellow pad.
Yes.
I wrote a short story I really liked. I sent it to some people for feedback, and someone wrote back, "We are looking for a book. We want to write a young adult book about a cult, and we love your voice." Huh? I had no idea they even had I didn't send it to someone thinking they had
the serious child who people watches and takes in all kinds of ideas. That's fascinating. That sounds like it worked for you.
Yeah. So writing came back to me in a surprising way. It was like, whoa.
Isn't that something?
That was my dream, and then my dream sort of fell into my lap.
Isn't that
episode.
something? So I often talk on this show about setting intentions, and sometimes we set very conscious ones, which I think it's important to get to a place of setting them consciously. But then there are unconscious ones, or ones you thought no one heard except, well, the universe.
Yeah.
And they start to emerge for you.
And I think they're powerful. I've set intentions with my first book. I wrote in like a piece of paper and I put it in a box and I put it by my bed, and it was about being a bestseller.
Yes.
And those didn't really come to fruition.
Yet.
That's a good point. Hasn't yet. But I love the idea that things are in our subconscious, or we've just put them out there. I like that. So.
And giving them permission to go for it. That's what I do now. I just say, okay, I give spirit and myself permission to allow this to go forward, and then you just live.
Yeah.
You live, and then you see how it unfolds.
I think life can bring some really cool opportunities. When you're scratching and you're clawing and something isn't quite working, life can really show up for you.
Yes, definitely.
Like, wow.
Definitely.
It didn't even feel like effort. That just kind of came the back door, and thank you so much.
Fell in your lap.
Yeah, while I was busy over here. Right.
I love that. Exactly. While I was busy over here.
Yeah.
Exactly. What would you say about your process? I was thinking when I was looking at your work, this is a great time for all the writers out here to have a successful writer talk about her process a little bit, if you care to share anything.
So it's interesting because both of my books, I was really fortunate. People sort of came to me because they knew my voice. And so my process was, and it was like, okay, girl, you got 1 month to write an outline and 6 months to get this draft turned around. So my process, I just start putting really horrible things on the page that, I just start going. Good
point, though. The good and the bad, right?
Oh, yeah. Because if you get too scared and too timid about what you're putting on the page or trying to hit it out of the park, for me, no way. I have to just put literally, sometimes I'll type, I am just typing words on the computer. Or
interesting.
Literally just get it out there. So a really rough draft is my jam.
Is important.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
so you really appreciate the rough draft.
Oh, yeah. And I think no matter how, and even if you don't think you're doing a rough draft, an editor is going to come back to you and change everything anyway. So. But I have to say right now, I'm writing a book on my own. I don't have people waiting for it. And it's harder. It's harder for me but I'm doing it. It's my growth spot, though. Just like sit down and do this process and have faith in the idea and, without a deadline.
Let it unfold.
Without a deadline.
Oh.
That's just deadlines.
Oh, goodness. Nothing pushing you.
Yeah,
okay.
It's really different for me. So I'm doing it, but it's definitely slower.
And you're enjoying it?
Yeah, I am enjoying it, actually. It's much, I like the structure of having people waiting for stuff and things like that. So it's a little loosey-goosey for me, but I'm doing it. I'm sort of enjoying it.
It's sort of an anything can happen sort of feeling? Or?
I think I like the other one better, but
yes.
I'm getting through this. We'll see.
Oh, my goodness. There must be so much growth through it, is what I'm thinking. Because I think just, it sounds like every experience becomes a teaching moment for you.
Oh, yeah.
And for writers in particular, and I'm wondering about when you're kind of in your flow, do you feel you're doing it alone, or do you feel someone's over your shoulder, or that there's a collaboration of voices? How does that work for you?
I mean, I do feel like something takes over when you're in your flow, which is so beautiful, and you're sort of past the intellectual part of outlining. And you don't really know what's going to happen, but I have a real faith in that process. Something does definitely take over. And I had it with painting too. Like I've said this before.
I would think so. I think artists have that.
Yeah, you feel it. Like it comes over your body. And I know I've said before, if I'm crying when I'm writing a scene, or if I'm absolute, chills all over my body, that comes out in the writing.
Yes.
And I think there's something to that is probably more than just me sitting here or something. It's the closest I've come to the muse, but it's very real for sure.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you believe in writer's block?
Yeah. I think of it a little differently now. Anne Lamott
Oh, I'd
calls
love to hear.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anne Lamott calls it being emptied instead of blocked. And for me, that
Way
was
better.
I could really relate to that because writer's
Yeah.
block, you're like, well, what do I do about that? That sounds very mysterious, and I'll just sit here till I get unblocked.
Right.
And she says, and for me, I really relate to this. After writing 2 books, I was emptied. I was emptied of adjectives. I was emptied of inspiration. And she says, go to art museums or go in nature, whatever fills you back up.
Live a life.
Yeah, it's true. And
That makes sense.
For me, that's how you deal with writer's block. I do want to go back to about growth process and learning with writing.
Yes.
Someone said to me, when you finish a book, you realize everything you needed to write that book. And if you had that at the beginning, you learn so much when you write a book.
Wow.
You do. And at the end, you're like, that was everything I needed for this book. And I think you just can't know that until you finish the project.
So you kind of look back and you see the things that happened and situations and maybe conversations, choices you made.
Yeah, all of it.
Just starts to apply itself to your work.
As you're writing your manuscript, and you're getting feedback from editors and all of that, you start to say, oh, you know what, they should have gone there, should have done that, or this isn't working, and or I need to push myself to make these 2 characters sound different. They're sounding too much alike, all of it. And so when you're finally finished, it is so much work, but you're like, okay, now I know everything I had to do. You just don't know that when you start.
It's interesting. A scientist I knew years ago, I was wondering how he got, some of his theories and so forth, because there is a part of a creativity that goes with that. And he said, well, really, I just learned eventually that I'm working all the time when I'm pouring
So
myself
true.
a glass of milk, when I'm, walking out to get the mail. I'm just constantly working in my head. Would
Really
you say,
good.
I bet when you're working on a project, would you say that's the kind of thing that goes on?
Yes. And I had a yoga teacher recently say, if you feel drawn towards something, just do it. Don't overthink it. And I feel like that's addressing what you're saying. I just went to New York. I don't totally know why I went. I had some meetings, but now that I'm back and processing it, things are starting to make sense. But I do. It is everything you do. As a writer, you're going to use it.
Yes, yeah.
And my first book, I was practicing psychotherapy and really learned how to write dialogue, I think, by listening and all those conversations, and talk about using stuff that whole education. I'm not working as a psychotherapist. I have a master's degree, but it informs my writing.
Oh, I bet.
And I didn't know it was going to do. I certainly wouldn't have paid that amount of money to inform my writing, but we're here.
Gee, I think this will help me in my writing craft right now. Well, I had wanted to go back too and ask about not just your psychotherapy, but the art therapy.
Yes.
So it sounds like you do paint or draw? What is
I love to paint. I'm terrible at drawing. I'm very creative and good with color and texture, and horrible at making shapes look like they should look. Everything I draw looks like it goes through a dreamscape.
Ooh.
And I have finally sort of accepted
a lot of symbolism?
that. I guess so. Yeah, because I've met people who can draw perfectly, but they say they're not creative, and that's fascinating to me.
That is fascinating, because I think you have to consider yourself creative if you are painting or drawing or writing. Something creative is happening. Your imagination is coming into play.
But these are people who can sort
Or
of
is this
look
the graphic
at something.
artists?
Well, no, they can look at anything and just copy it down, and that's what they say they're doing. And for me to get something to look like that, forget it. It's not.
That's not.
Yeah, it's
the way
not going to
that's
happen.
working.
So and
So
I do
art.
paint.
Okay, wonderful. Why art therapy? And did you work as an art therapist?
I did. That's when I was practicing, I always used art, unless a client was completely against it. But everybody would sort of say, oh, I can't do art. And I'd say, okay, well, make something really awful, looking ugly for me. And they would just be set free. And so I would use it a lot to scale things with people.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about anger. Is it this big or this big? And how would it look in stick figures? Like, would it be bigger than you?
Great.
Yeah,
Yes.
and a lot of color. And I just found it to be so much more effective than just talk therapy. It was incredible. People are used to talking about their problems.
Yes,
so they sort of have a line about it. I don't think they mean to.
That's true.
Right?
An angle.
Yeah, or you're just used to
Yeah,
it. It's
yeah.
almost rehearsed. I don't think people try to do it that way. They just
No, they've gone over it so much.
so
in
many
their heads.
times. Yeah. So I have two things in the therapy I practiced. One was getting it out in images, which was totally different and moved things along, healing or insight so much faster. What was I going to say? And Oh, I lost it. It'll come back.
But that's what I was wondering about, was what kind of insight. There must have been a lot of call aha moments.
So many aha moments. People were sort of shocked at what would come out on the page. And again, it didn't have to be fine art. It would just be sort of visually representing. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I would also work with exceptions to their problems. So they know a lot about their problems. I was interested in, okay, so when the problem isn't there, let's really examine that. So that's
when it isn't there.
When it isn't there, an exception to the rule.
Okay.
And I would catch that. So that and drawing, it would just move the process along.
Oh my gosh.
Where I think in a lot of therapy, people just talk about their problems. I had an amazing mentor, David Marston, who's in LA, amazing, and did narrative therapy. And the narrative therapy, which is a lot about personifying your problems, mixed with the art, was fantastic.
All right. How do you do you have them, just briefly, the process, would you have them draw something on a theme, or just let them say, here's a good time to now draw and let out whatever you want to let out?
More of that. So we'd be having a conversation. You might come in and say, it's just absolutely, we'll use anger.
Okay.
I went to see my mother the other day, and she started talking about something, and I just felt rage. And I said, okay, well, wait, let's stop for a minute. How would you feel about drawing that rage? And then we could talk about,
vulnerable is what I would be feeling.
Oh, really?
just hearing that, I would be, and I had a great relationship with my mother.
Yeah.
But my first thought, and because I'm not an artist, I can hear all the criticism. I can hear, oh my gosh, you want me to draw something? I'm not even sure how that would look.
And I would address that. So I would say, okay, well, here's some pastels. And would anger would it be red? Or would it be a light pink? Or would it be a light blue? Let's start with that. Okay. Would it be a little ball? Or would it be a big dip? Would it have spikes? Things like that. So
very
I would sort
interesting.
of take you through it.
Okay, so the person can start.
And when you left, or when later when your mom served lunch and had your favorite cake or whatever, did the anger get a little smaller, or did it get bigger? Things like that. What feeds it? And usually that would become a character in our therapy. Let's keep anger around. We have this symbol
and use
now,
it, and
talk about what makes it grow, what feeds it, what makes it shrink. And this really works. This is the narrative therapy. And then I was visualizing it. We would really examine that. When is it not around? And when people have that, now we've got this black spiky cloud floating around. It's made with really dark pastel.
A client might say, so today I have the black spiky cloud with me, and it stands for this now, rather than maybe what they first.
Well, usually it was pretty consistent, but it would be sort of I think people's problems are sort of consistent, and we can get like a little cast of characters or symbols. And they're probably going to be what we carry with us. And I was trained that a lot of people don't transcend their problems. They turn the volumes up, and problems are very present right now. The black spiky cloud, or the volumes down, and
a raindrop.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually, my supervisor and I didn't totally agree on this. I think people can transcend problems, but we're different that way.
We can. That's right in there with that question from psychology as to whether you, at some point in your life, do you ever really change your personality?
Right.
And I don't. My feeling is that I've seen people, and in my own experience, I have let things go. I finally reach something that is ultimately correct for me.
Right.
I can see that I can see the whole gamut that I went. Talk about your stories, but if your goal is not just to repeat your story over and over and over again, my point of view is that you're learning to evolve and be done with past pain and move on beyond it. And it turns into something else, and it kind of turns into tools that you can use. And I feel I've seen that. Certainly seen it for myself, and so you do drop
I
the
agree.
pain.
And I loved that opening quote about the light and the dark and everything we go through, and for me that really describes it. How do you yeah, you're sort of going to traverse these things and explore them and get stuck in these dark forests sometimes and then come out. But it's part of your history. And
yes, very much so. Let's talk about your novel, Tarot.
Okay.
What do you want to say about it? What would you like to say about that? Would you like to tell the story briefly?
Yeah, so it's sort of a reimagining of how the tarot deck came to be. And in this story, it's a fairy tale. And a 16-year-old girl has woven these tapestries. And she has to sort of cut them up. She's on the run. And they become her tarot deck. And I was really interested in showing teens how to use spirituality in their lives without hitting them over the head with it. So she's constantly weaving new cards through her experiences. And then she sort of sits with it. And then she starts to have this deck that were these tapestries, because her tapestries were of the cups, swords.
The character's name is Anna?
Anna.
Is that right? And Anna certainly is living light, dark.
For sure.
Difficulty to joy.
She's running from the Hierophant King. Do you say Hierophant or Hierophant?
I say Hierophant.
And I think that's correct. I think in my head, while I was writing it, I was pronouncing it wrong. And she's locked in the tower. With words, sure. Right? Yeah. She's locked in the tower, and her advisors are the magician, the hermit, and the fool. She eventually goes to Cups.
The magician, the hermit, and the fool.
Those are her advisors.
All right.
So yeah, she's constantly going through sort of shadow and light and parts of her identity. So that's it was a really fun way to introduce tarot to different people, and if people don't know anything about tarot, I think it's going to plant seeds. They will read this book and then walk around like, oh, I didn't know that was.
I wonder if that's a magician condition or.
Yeah, that's true, right? That is a magician condition. I love that.
I do when I'm working with people. I'll say something like, that's a world position, or the moon phase. You're in that place with the moon, charting a new course. And I'll if I'm not doing a tarot reading, I might be describing a card or two that symbolically helps people see. But that's one of the things I love about the tarot anyway, is that feeling that when you lay out a reading for someone, they go, what's that card? They hone in on the one that makes the most sense to them or is meaningful to them in that moment.
I love that.
So, yeah. I was identifying with Anna.
How so?
And I love how she's going into worlds. She goes into the Cups world. I don't want to give anything away. I'm not, I think, but she goes into the different.
In this book, she just goes into Cups.
Okay.
She sort of lays a spread. She's being pursued in the forest, and she just sort of throws her cards down. Normally, she thinks that her loom, she says, but this will have to do. So she's got these torn pieces of her tapestries. She throws them down just to think. So that's the first, spread, and she's basically thrown Cups.
I see.
And then a bridge sort of appears. She doesn't know why this is happening, or she just, there's a bridge. I didn't notice that before.
She doesn't have her power yet.
She doesn't have her power
She's
yet.
Discovering herself.
Exactly. Okay. And she doesn't really discover, through the book, she discovers her powers and where she is and how it relates to her. And so a little bit of a mystery.
Nice.
Yeah.
Aww. Oh, I'm hoping people will look for this book. We'll hold it up toward the end for sure.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of things. It's easy fantasy. It's not so much world building. If you don't like fantasy normally, I've heard from people, it's not so much world building that it's kind of a turn off, and there's a romance in it, and it's just a lot of fun.
That's what I felt. Some fantasy, they're so packed. It's like,
me too.
You'd better not put it down or you won't remember where you are in it. But this is a YA novel is really exciting. And I think adults should read YA novels, by the way.
Tell me about that.
I think the story, just the through lines. The storylines are a little... It's funny, I think that when you are reading something that is for children or for teenagers, the complexity comes from the reader.
Yes.
And you will make it more complex as an adult. And teenagers have different perspectives, which I think are really fascinating. Anyway, I think teenagers are fascinating because they're just in that process of becoming, and they're not afraid to be in the process of blossoming or opening. So a lot of the stories go with that.
And
so
I think
it's good for adults to go back and
because you're going back to such a powerful time in
period
your
of
life.
time. Yeah.
And most of these, I mean, most YA is written by adults who are going back to that time in their life that was so powerful and poignant and
So
writing from
true.
that place,
So
right?
true.
So
Yeah.
usually it is pretty powerful stuff.
What's the next work you're
I'm
looking
working
at?
on a story. It's kind of autobiographical. It takes place at a public high school in Santa Monica, and I'm interested in how public school can cover so many demographics. Back when I was in high school, there was no Malibu High. So we had these really, really wealthy people driving down PCH from mansions. We had people living in, little apartments down in Southside Santa Monica and everything in between. But there's 5 girls, and various things happen, and they become witches.
Oh,
So that is, I don't want, again, I never like to hit anyone over the head.
this
so
audience will be looking for that.
Okay. Working title, The Witches of
Exciting.
Malibu. I'm very excited about it. It's really
my.
fun.
Oh, can't wait. Yes, we'll just keep making that space to write then. There we
Yes,
go.
okay.
Absolutely.
Will do.
I wanted to bring up some of the topics you and I had shared, but mainly it's getting to some things that you had talked about. You were talking about transparency and social media.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of
So,
thing?
I actually just was listening to Stephanie Garber on Sarah Ennie's podcast. Stephanie is the writer of Caraval, that series.
Oh, all right.
And she just came out with the last one, which is a really, really finale, really fun series. And I was listening to this podcast, and she's so open about her process. You see these people on social media and you think, well, gosh, there's her series just hit the New York Times. Everything must be perfect. Everything was probably perfect from the beginning.
They're just folding it out.
Yeah, they are. Exactly. Just walking their little path. And she talked about her struggles and going through a time of depression and all kinds of interesting things. And I was fascinated. And I thought, just gosh, good for her for sharing this. It certainly makes me feel more human. And I'm not great at that.
Are you comfortable on Instagram?
I'm comfortable in showing sort of my garden and what I ate for lunch and my trip to New York.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm not filming when, I'm losing my patience with my kid or, whatever. Yeah. I know no one does, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Or like right now, there's a lot of dishes in the sink. I'm not, and nobody really does, but when people do, I actually really like it.
But there's some feeling that there are people that just are, they're having an easier time with, here's a picture of this. And then they kind of come from a depth of themselves. And I'm like, gee, it's easy.
I know. I mean, I keep it pretty sort of professional for the book.
Yes.
And then also on the flip side, I'm not comfortable with a feeling of sort of bragging. I don't know if that's appropriate, but sometimes if I am with my kid and we're in the most amazing place or with my husband on this date, I tend not to start photographing everything because somebody's at work and they don't want to be there. And they don't want to see this right now. So
why do they want to see this?
Yeah, I'm a little sensitive to that too.
That's interesting. Yeah, it feels
right down the middle, I think.
I'd rather be going back and forth with. Twitter is one I kind of like because then you can establish a bit of a rapport sometimes with someone that you're talking to,
which is so neat.
That's my preference.
The connection on Instagram, especially the book community, has been amazing to me.
In what way?
Just I'll make a comment to someone and they write back, or someone I really admire.
That's great.
And even Sarah Jessica Parker, who I love, I made some comment and she wrote back right away on the comments, and I was like, oh, SJP.
That's one of
But I've met a lot of authors and a lot of book lovers through Instagram, and it's just such a lovely community.
Oh, it's an Instagram support group in some way.
It is. It really is. Like the book community is amazing on Instagram.
Oh, that's incredible. So. What do you think of writers' groups, as a matter of fact? Have you ever been in one?
They sound amazing.
Okay.
I've never been in a writer's group.
Okay.
I
guess you could start one specifically on wine.
I probably could. I've always been sort of on my own with writing, and then the last couple of years I've sort of met people through my other publisher, and then now I'm more people with Penguin Teen, and so I'm starting to have a community, and it's amazing. I have 2 friends who I send my drafts to, and those are I'll send them anything. I can be so vulnerable with them.
Right. Right.
They're fabulous writers in their own right. But I've in the past was very isolated, and I'm reaching out more, and I think the community is amazing, and it can be online. A writers group would probably be wonderful for me. I haven't done it yet, but it'll happen.
That's okay. That's worth talking about too. You talked about at some point feeling very isolated. I wondered if that was the desire, though, to be isolated, and then at some point you talked about reaching out more to community.
Definitely.
How did that transpire?
Being a little bit different as a kid and a teenager. I've always had a really close set of friends, but I tended towards kind of, I don't know. It's the dark and the light side of being alone. Sometimes
cruising the light and the shadow.
It is, and I think looking back on it, sometimes I did isolate myself because that was really comfortable in what I could. I'm a very outgoing introvert. I agree. I always have to go back and recharge by myself. But now, for some reason, I'm just a little more sort of settled in my life, and I'm more of a joiner. I was not a joiner. Enjoy anything. I will go out more with groups of people and be a little bit more comfortable now. I could join a writer's group or a book club. Before, I just didn't have an interest.
Sure, that's something you wanted to do.
Yeah, I just really liked sort of being on my own, being with my close people and my family. I'm more open now, just as I get a little older.
You talked a little bit about attending festivals or feeling uncomfortable or shut down about attending festivals that you weren't particularly invited to participate in.
My first book, if I wasn't invited to a local festival, I just wanted nothing to do with it. I don't know if my ego was hurt or I didn't see how fruitful it would be to go. Where now I've been invited to some festivals and participated as a panelist.
Sure.
Dream come true, fabulous. But I've also just gone and attended. It's so fun.
And it's fun.
It's
then the pressure's off, isn't it?
Exactly. You just get to go and enjoy. And I look back at myself like, I can understand it, why I felt very rejected before.
Yeah.
I had these high expectations.
Maybe didn't know as many people.
I didn't. That's
to begin
so true.
with,
And I didn't realize
too,
that's how you build your community. You go to these things and you go to workshops and all kinds of things I just never did.
Gosh.
So
do you have like your own booth? Boy, I haven't been in a long time myself. But for writers, do you like have your own booth, or does your publisher have a place for you to set up your books and
I just went
sign and
if you if you're participating or if they've asked you to come sign, Penguin has a gorgeous booth at the LA Times Festival of Books. So it was just so fun. You go to them and you sign your books, and then you go on a panel. But I went to Y'all West, which took place at my old high school, Santa Monica High. And I didn't expect this. I got there, and of course Penguin Teen had a booth, and they were like, this is your home for the day if you want to come back. And they handed me a bunch of samplers of my books, and we're so happy you're here.
Great.
I mean, what a validation of sort of reaching outside of my comfort zone a little bit.
This is what you want from your publisher.
Oh, they're amazing. Penguin Teen and Razorbill are amazing.
These are okay. So you've heard it here. These are favorites for YA. Okay.
Lovely.
Let's see. You mentioned someone, and I don't know if that's who you wanted. Who did you want to talk about? I see that you were talking about taking a writing course. Right. Even now, because I agree, no matter what you do, you still probably need to go back. I don't care what professional you are, you must probably go back and study with someone, gain a different perspective.
Again, after my first novel, I remember my stepmom saying, so what do you want to do to further your education as a writer? And I was like, nothing. I just wrote a book. I need to do it. I don't need to take a class. Clearly, I have it going on. But I think it's part of what Anne Lamott says about filling back up. So the first thing I did was
Anne Lamott, by the way, just to bring her up just for a moment.
Lots of
Anne
moments.
Lamott is an incredible writer of books for writers and workshops. And I think of her as a spiritual teacher.
Oh, she is. She's a spiritual writing teacher. Yeah. It's incredible. I went back to Bird by Bird when I was like, what am I doing?
Yes. I read her years and years ago.
So that was part of my journey of let's fill back up. And then I signed up for Sarah Selecki. She does an online writing course. She has a school, actually, an online writing school. And, I definitely find, you were saying about the scientist and you're working all the time. I've taken that course. I've been reading craft books. This is all very new for me. And it's not like a one-to-one, like, okay, I do the lesson. I'm working on my manuscript, which feels very separate from the education.
Right.
But I think it backdoors it and it feeds it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And just one last thing I wanted to ask you. Do you have anything you'd say, any advice for beginning writers or those who are trying to go into professional writing?
I think that would be my question. What do you want to do with your writing? Because, and a lot of people say this, publishing and writing are so different.
That's a different thing.
They're so different. So do you want to be published? And if so, why? I think it's just something to think about. Is it because you want everyone to hear what you have to say, or you want to make money, or whatever it is? Because I just feel like they're two separate things. So just to know that, and try to keep your writing process a bit as separate from that as you can, because that'll keep it sort of free.
Because writing is the life, isn't it?
And the process. And when you think of someone over your shoulder, will they like this? Will it sell? It can really block you. So, and I'm saying that to myself as well. I have to constantly remind myself that, like, to have that freedom.
I have a reason for writing for myself rather than I'm writing to publish. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And just because you just block that freedom, and you need that freedom to write. So if you feel I would say to aspiring writers, get your best stuff out, and then sort of worrying about the process of selling it
later on, afterwards. Wonderful.
And then I really think self-publishing is also, if you can't go the traditional way, it's amazing, these opportunities that we didn't have. You know, when I was little.
So you like it. Okay. Some people have said things against it, or disparaging things, and then others have said they like it.
I think I think self-publishing is a really valid, fantastic way to go. Traditional publishing is it's not easier. If you get to that point, it feels great. And I was saying that there's a stigma against self-publishing, I think.
All right. Yes.
But that's something I think it's just ego stuff, and we have to push it aside, because there are a lot of self-published authors who are making a lot of money, and they're really successful.
Who are really great writers.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Now,
I mean, maybe there was a time when it was like, well, I can't get my book published, so I'm going to self-publish it. But that's not true now. Yeah. It's changing.
And people probably do it for different reasons. So, I think there's going to be crap that's traditionally published by big houses, and there's going to be crap that's self-published, and there's going to be gold in both of those places.
Both places.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It feels good to have a big publisher. My first book was a small publisher. No one had heard of it. It was digital. And I was excited about that, and that's where I was. This has been really fun. I'm in Barnes & Noble now.
Tarot is in... Oh, good. Tarot is in Barnes & Noble. Woo.
So I'm not going to lie. It feels good, but I don't think that should stop people. And it wouldn't. I don't think it would stop me. My first book of short stories is self-published. So,
thank you. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this discussion. This is exciting.
Thank you.
Now, may I do a tarot reading for you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to take a moment and shuffle the cards. If you want to set an intention in your mind, that's fine. You don't have, or if you want to share it.
Well, I was thinking last time you did a reading for me, there was this opportunity coming, and I'm just curious about that.
Oh, you just want to see opportunities.
I've been waiting for it.
Okay. Let's ask that. I usually just draw one card. So let's see. Occasionally, I get asked. And you
know what else?
To me,
whatever happens.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. So I have shuffled the cards and cut them. Would you please just feel along wherever it feels right? Draw out a card. Oh, that one. All right. 6 of Wands. Well, you're being told victory.
Ooh.
So you're talking. Your question was about opportunities. The story of the 6 of Wands is very much he's on the person riding, so she on horseback, but they've come from war basically, or a process, or a series of actions, and now it's culminated in success, is what it's saying. It's interesting to me. You're asking about other possibilities. This card would say, enjoy the success right now. And I understand this also intuitively. So it's not only appreciate the success, enjoy where you are, There's more to come also, certainly when a card like this comes out. But from this perspective of having been successful, the new opportunities will make sense to you,
Okay.
will arise for you. Do you have a particular question, though, about the opportunity? Like, is there something you need to do or see? Is that a possible question you
Well,
have?
if there's something I need to do or see, I'd love to know.
I'd like to know. Yeah, I'd like to know that. Actually, here, I won't do it. Go ahead.
Pick it
Choose.
again?
Yes.
Okay.
I was saying I'm not going to choose it. Please choose for yourself. Okay. Interesting. Knight of Swords. One more time, you're being told don't rush things.
Okay.
You're actually being told just be where you are, watch this success culminate and put itself into perspective, lay itself out for you. I want to say, I feel like we're talking about tarot.
It feels like that to me,
It's
too.
just growing and growing and growing. It's maybe subtle right now, but there's a voice for this book is what it feels like. So you're going to be working with that more and more. But then you're being told don't miss the opportunities that are already right here.
Love it.
The Knight of Swords. So I did draw this second card, or rather, I'm sorry, Marissa drew this second card that says you could rush too fast and miss something. It's funny, I'm hearing journal right now for yourself. Journal what's going on for you in the process you're in right now, which will give you more insight into the opportunities coming forward. It'll tell you what you want and where you want to go from here.
Okay. I love it.
Okay?
Thank you.
It's a beautiful reading. I really appreciate thank you, Spirit. I appreciate the messages that came through with that as well.
Yes.
Do you want to share your contact information or anything coming up?
Sure. I'm really at the end of my promo tour, so I don't have events to share, but you can visit me at mkennerson.net.
Yay. Okay.
And please do, and I love to hear from people. And
Wonderful. Yeah, so your information will be up also on the Cruising in the Light and Shadow website as
fantastic.
well. So perfect. They can check in and see.
I love to hear from readers, too.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. And would you be willing to share a quote here at the end of our episode?
Absolutely. I feel like this is a little bit of a jump, but it's what I was thinking about. It's the idea of how you build confidence. And I think about this being a mother.
No, we all need that. So that's
right.
why
I'm
like
raising a
perfect.
child, and just in my own life, how do you build confidence? And I used to think of the expression "fake it till you make it," and this high performance psychologist Michael Gervais, he says that's no good. We don't want to fake it, and the way we get confidence is trust in self. And so he says to really stretch yourself, to do things you're really afraid to do, and then go back and process it. And for children, it's process it with your family. For us, it might be journaling. And that's how you build trust in self, and that's how you build confidence. And I love that. I'm doing it all the time, like going to New York. I hadn't been there for 14 years. I was a little nervous, but I just thought of this quote, stretch yourself.
Yes.
And now I'm back, and everything went great. And I think it does. It really builds confidence. And I'm doing this all the time. I've had a lot of speaking engagements and things that were new. And I said, just push yourself to that edge.
And you just went ahead and...
Yeah, and then you process it, and it's amazing. Today when I came, I didn't have the nerves because I was like, I've been doing this. You do. You start to trust yourself.
Like, I'm okay with this. Yeah. It's the Fool card. It's the leap of faith. And sometimes... I need to read more about your Fool, but to me, I always call it a calculated leap anyway.
Yes.
And you are learning as you go. There can be many little leaps of faith as you go along.
And it's a safe stretch. You're not stretching yourself to the edge of. I'm not jumping out of planes or anything like that. These are very sort of safe things to do. But they might make me feel anxious or nervous, and I just find it really works.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
For our YouTube people, I'm holding up the book, and it's called Tarot, and this is Marissa Kennerson.
Oh, and let me give a little plug for Danielle Knoll of Starchild Tarot. she designs these gorgeous tarot decks, and she designed the cover, and it's her moon card. So she's a lovely person.
Oh,
Do you know her
she
decks?
has her own deck? No, I don't know
Several
that person.
decks. She's
There's
really
so
neat.
many. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I may even have some, and
You
I just
might,
didn't
yeah.
know that that's who I've got.
Yeah.
Again, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you to Paul Preston, our podcast technician, Kevin McLeod for the music, Allison Werner as my social media consultant and friend. And listeners, keep cruising in your light and shadows. Join me in 2 weeks. Om Shanti.